Hey man, there's a growing number of men who feel something is off, even if they can't fully articulate it yet. They follow the rules they were taught: be respectful, be consistent, communicate clearly, and still end up confused, drained, or discarded. Not because they did something outrageous, but because the environment they're operating in no longer rewards those behaviors the way it once did. What worked before doesn't land the same now, and pretending otherwise only keeps men stuck repeating the same mistakes. The problem isn't effort. Most men today are putting in more effort than ever. They're more emotionally aware, more accommodating, more willing to compromise, yet outcomes haven't improved. If anything, they've become more unstable. Relationships start fast and collapse just as quickly. Expectations rise, patience drops, and tolerance for imperfection disappears. And men are left wondering how doing more somehow started producing less. Modern dating is built on constant comparison. No matter how present you are, there's always someone else a swipe away. No matter how consistent you behave, novelty competes with familiarity. This creates an environment where commitment feels optional and replaceability feels normal. And when replacement is easy, investment becomes shallow. Why work through discomfort when something new promises excitement without responsibility? What used to be built through time is now expected immediately. Emotional connection is rushed, intimacy is accelerated, boundaries are blurred early, and when reality fails to match the fantasy that was formed too quickly, disappointment sets in. Not because anyone lied, but because expectations were built faster than trust. Men who move deliberately often feel outpaced by a culture that confuses speed with depth. There's also a mismatch in incentives. Men are still expected to lead, provide, protect, and stabilize, while being endlessly flexible emotionally. But the appreciation for those roles has eroded. Stability is taken for granted. Consistency is interpreted as boring, and emotional restraint is misunderstood as lack of interest. This puts men in a paradox where they're punished both for being steady and for reacting. Communication, once seen as a solution, has become another pressure point. Say too little and you're distant. Say too much and you're overwhelming. Express boundaries and you're controlling. Stay silent and you're uninvested. The rules shift depending on mood, timing, and perception. And when rules aren't stable, trust erodes, not because of malice, but because clarity never has time to settle. Dating today also rewards surface-level engagement over long-term alignment. How you look, how you text, how entertaining you are in short bursts often matters more than how you handle stress, responsibility, or conflict. Men who think long-term find themselves competing in a short-term marketplace, and that mismatch leaves them feeling unseen, even when they're doing everything right. Another quiet issue is emotional outsourcing. Many people enter dating expecting connection to fix dissatisfaction in their own lives. When that relief fades, blame follows. Men become emotional anchors without being treated as partners. They're expected to absorb stress, provide reassurance, and remain unshaken while their own needs are postponed indefinitely. Over time, that dynamic drains respect on both sides. This doesn't mean meaningful relationships are impossible. It means the path to them has narrowed. Fewer people are willing to tolerate discomfort long enough to build something real. Fewer are interested in growth that requires patience, and men who sense this early often choose withdrawal, not because they're incapable of connection, but because the cost-benefit equation no longer makes sense. When dating stops producing clarity, peace, or forward momentum, stepping back becomes a rational decision. Not bitter, not resentful, just practical. Sometimes the healthiest response to a broken system isn't trying harder within it, it's reassessing whether participation still aligns with who you're becoming. When men step back, it's often mistaken as fear or bitterness, but what's actually happening is assessment, a quiet recalibration. They're noticing that the emotional return no longer matches the emotional investment, that the effort required just to stay neutral has increased, while appreciation has quietly vanished. They're not angry, they're tired. Tired of conversations that feel like negotiations, tired of ambiguity dressed up as depth, and tired of being told to do better in a system where the standards are constantly shifting. A lot of men don't talk about how disorienting it feels to be emotionally present, yet perpetually replaceable. You can show consistency, reliability, patience, yet still feel like you're auditioning for relevance. One misstep, one moment of misunderstanding, 1 week where life demands your attention elsewhere, and suddenly everything is questioned. That kind of fragility in connection doesn't build trust, it builds anxiety. and anxiety is not a foundation for intimacy. It's a slow leak that drains interest on both sides. There's also the issue of acceleration. Relationships now move at a pace that doesn't allow character to reveal itself naturally. Emotional closeness is rushed before values are tested. Physical intimacy arrives before emotional alignment, and when cracks appear, as they always do, there's no framework to handle them. Instead of repair, there's replacement. Instead of conversation, there's distance. Men who think in terms of longevity find themselves navigating a culture obsessed with immediacy. What makes this especially difficult is that many men are doing genuine inner work. They're learning emotional awareness, they're regulating reactions, they're trying to communicate clearly. But instead of these traits being met with stability, they're often met with confusion. Calm is interpreted as lack of passion, boundaries are seen as resistance, and leadership without emotional theatrics is misunderstood. When effort stops being recognized, motivation quietly disappears. Modern dating also blurs accountability. Feelings are treated as facts, impulses are justified as self-expression, and when something no longer feels good, walking away is framed as empowerment rather than avoidance. Men who are wired to solve problems find themselves stuck in dynamics where problems aren't meant to be solved, only escaped. And you can't build anything meaningful with someone who treats discomfort as danger. Another reality men are waking up to is how asymmetrical vulnerability has become. They're encouraged to open up, to be emotionally transparent, but when they do, that openness is often stored, not supported, used later as context, leverage, or quiet judgment. Over time, men learn that emotional exposure doesn't always create closeness, it can create distance, so they pull back, not to punish, but to protect what should never have been mishandled. Dating now requires a level of emotional management that borders on performance. You're expected to be interesting, but not intense, confident, but not dominant, available, but not eager, vulnerable, but not affected. The margin for error shrinks, while the expectations expand, and when self-expression starts feeling like choreography, authenticity becomes risky. Men sense this instinctively, and many decide the cost isn't worth the confusion. It's not that men don't want connection, it's that they're no longer willing to be the emotional shock absorber in relationships that lack structure. They're no longer willing to constantly interpret mixed signals or decode emotional shifts that aren't communicated clearly. Peace has become more attractive than possibility, and clarity has become more valuable than chemistry. Stepping back gives men something they've been missing: perspective. Without the constant push to engage, they see patterns more clearly. They notice how often attraction was fueled by tension rather than alignment, how often excitement replaced compatibility, and how rarely mutual effort sustained itself once novelty faded. That awareness changes priorities. It shifts focus from chasing connection to building a life that doesn't depend on it. So when men say dating doesn't work the way it used to, they're not rejecting women, they're rejecting instability, they're rejecting confusion, they're rejecting a culture that celebrates emotional chaos while expecting men to remain endlessly composed within it. And choosing not to participate in that dynamic isn't failure, it's discernment. It's a man deciding that his energy, time, and emotional integrity are worth protecting. As men pull back, something uncomfortable surfaces: how much dating had become a source of identity rather than connection. For a long time, attention from women acted as proof of worth, progress, or success. When that attention became unstable, men weren't just losing relationships, they were losing feedback loops that once validated them. Stepping away forces a reckoning. It strips away external affirmation and replaces it with silence. And in that silence, a man either collapses or he finally builds something solid within himself. What many men discover during this withdrawal is how little space they had to be human. Mistakes felt unforgivable, fatigue felt unattractive, struggle felt like failure. There was no room to slow down, recalibrate, or grow quietly. You were either performing well or you were slipping. That pressure doesn't inspire love, it inspires self-monitoring, and self-monitoring kills presence faster than conflict ever could. Dating now often demands emotional precision without offering emotional safety. You're expected to regulate perfectly, communicate flawlessly, and adapt continuously while receiving little assurance that your effort is actually valued. Over time, men internalize a dangerous lesson that showing up authentically risks loss, and when authenticity feels unsafe, withdrawal becomes the healthiest option. there's also a growing realization that many connections never had a future, only momentum. They felt intense because they were fast, not because they were meaningful. And once the momentum slowed, there was nothing underneath to hold it together. Men who think in terms of building notice this pattern quickly. They stop confusing excitement with foundation. They stop mistaking attention for alignment. Stepping away from dating also exposes how often men were compromising their long-term goals for short-term connection. Time that could have been invested into craft, health, or purpose was being poured into managing uncertainty. Conversations that went nowhere, dynamics that required constant recalibration. Once that energy returns to its rightful place, priorities sharpen, focus returns, direction becomes clearer. This shift doesn't make men cynical, it makes them selective. They begin evaluating relationships the same way they evaluate any serious investment, by sustainability, not thrill, by structure, not emotion, by effort over time, not intensity in moments. And many realize that what's currently being offered in the dating landscape doesn't meet that threshold. There's a quiet dignity in choosing solitude over emotional noise, not isolation, but intentional aloneness, the kind that allows a man to hear his own thoughts again, to reconnect with his instincts, to remember who he was before constant evaluation entered the picture. This space isn't empty, it's restorative, and once experienced, it's hard to give up. Men also begin to see how often they were asked to be emotionally available without being emotionally supported, to listen without being heard, to understand without being understood, to stabilize without being anchored. That imbalance doesn't collapse relationships immediately, it erodes them slowly, and recognizing that erosion changes how much access a man is willing to grant. Over time, stepping back stops feeling like avoidance and starts feeling like alignment. Life becomes simpler, decisions become cleaner. You're no longer trying to fit into dynamics that don't match your values, and that clarity doesn't make you closed. It makes you grounded. You're open to connection that complements your direction, not distracts from it. So when men say dating doesn't work the way it used to, what they're really saying is this: the current structure doesn't support depth, stability, or growth, and until it does, opting out isn't resignation, it's self-respect. It's a man choosing to build his life first, knowing that anything meaningful must eventually meet him where he stands. What many men begin doing instead is turning inward, not in isolation but in intention. They start rebuilding neglected parts of their lives that were quietly sidelined while they try to make relationships work. Health routines return, discipline tightens, focus sharpens. They rediscover how satisfying progress feels when it isn't constantly interrupted by emotional turbulence. This isn't avoidance, it's recalibration. It's a man remembering that his life has weight and direction beyond romantic outcomes. Work becomes more than a distraction, it becomes a stabilizer. When effort produces predictable results, confidence grows naturally. You see cause and effect again. You invest energy and watch something tangible improve. That sense of control contrasts sharply with the unpredictability of modern dating, where effort often yields confusion instead of clarity. Men gravitate toward environments where responsibility is rewarded, not punished. Friendships deepen in ways they hadn't before. Conversations become more honest, less filtered. Men speak openly about frustration, fatigue, and uncertainty without fear of it being used against them. There's relief in being understood without needing to perform emotional competence perfectly. That support system, once undervalued, becomes essential. It reminds men they're not alone and that their experiences aren't personal failures but shared patterns. Purpose begins to take precedence over possibility. Instead of asking who might fit into their lives, men ask what kind of life they want to live. That question changes everything. Decisions stop revolving around attraction and start revolving around alignment. Time becomes intentional, energy becomes guarded, and suddenly, many things that once felt necessary lose their appeal entirely. There's also a psychological shift that happens when men stop chasing connection for validation. Self-worth detaches from external feedback. Approval becomes optional instead of essential, and with that shift comes emotional steadiness. You no longer ride the highs of attention or sink into the lows of indifference. Your mood stabilizes because it's no longer outsourced. Men also start recognizing how much emotional labor they were performing without realizing it, anticipating reactions, softening truths, carrying conversations, managing tension. Once that burden lifts, mental clarity returns, thoughts slow down, sleep improves, decision-making sharpens. The absence of constant emotional negotiation feels like relief, not emptiness. With clarity comes standards, not demands. Standards, quiet, firm expectations about communication, effort, and accountability. These standards aren't announced up front, they're enforced through behavior. If something doesn't align, men disengage without drama. That restraint isn't cold, it's deliberate. It signals self-respect more clearly than any boundary speech ever could. Over time, men become less reactive to cultural narratives about loneliness or inadequacy. They stop believing that being unattached equals being incomplete. They experience firsthand how peace, structure, and forward momentum can outweigh the comfort of inconsistent connection. And once that realization settles in, fear loses its leverage. This doesn't mean men abandon the idea of partnership altogether. It means they redefine it. They no longer seek someone to fill gaps or soothe restlessness. They seek someone who complements a life already in motion, someone who adds clarity, not complication. That shift dramatically narrows the field, but improves the quality of what remains. And perhaps most importantly, men learn patience again, not passive waiting, but grounded patience rooted in self-trust. They understand that meaningful connection can't be forced or rushed, and until alignment appears naturally, building their own life isn't a fallback plan, it's the main mission. As men step into this quieter focus, something unexpected happens around them. The absence of pursuit changes how interactions unfold. There's no longer an undercurrent of trying to impress or convince. Conversations feel lighter, less loaded, and when pressure disappears, authenticity has room to surface. People sense the difference immediately, even if they can't name it. This shift subtly alters dynamics. When a man isn't chasing outcomes, he stops being predictable, not in a manipulative way, but in a grounded one. His actions aren't driven by fear of loss or hunger for approval. They're guided by discernment, and discernment creates intrigue because it can't be rushed or controlled. Interest begins to operate on different terms. Instead of responding to effort, it responds to presence. Instead of being pulled by intensity, it's drawn towards stability. The energy changes from negotiation to mutual recognition, and that recognition, when it happens, feels cleaner than anything built on momentum alone. You notice how much clearer signals become when you're not flooding the space with effort. Small behaviors stand out, follow through matters more, tone carries weight. You're no longer guessing, you're reading, and reading reality accurately feels empowering after years of interpreting mixed messages. There's also a new kind of confidence that forms, not loud, not performative. It comes from knowing you don't need to win every interaction. You're not auditioning for acceptance, you're evaluating compatibility. That shift places you back in your own frame instead of orbiting someone else's emotional state. As your focus stabilizes, your tolerance for ambiguity drops. You don't rush to confront it, but you don't ignore it either. You allow it to show itself fully, and when it does, you respond with action rather than explanation. That decisiveness keeps your life moving forward without unnecessary friction. People begin meeting you with more intention. They think before acting. They sense that inconsistency won't be chased, yet sincerity will be received. This creates a natural sorting process, one that doesn't require ultimatums or debates. Alignment either emerges or distance forms quietly. What once felt like withdrawal now feels like clarity. You're no longer stepping away from connection, you're stepping towards self-respect. That difference matters. It keeps bitterness out of the equation. You're not avoiding relationships, you're refusing confusion. The irony is that this grounded stance often invites better interactions than chasing ever did. Without trying, you become easier to be around. There's less tension, less performance, more ease. And ease allows people to show who they really are, rather than who they think they need to be. By the time this shift fully settles, dating stops feeling like a battlefield or a puzzle. It becomes optional, not essential. And from that place of choice, not pressure, you finally have the clarity to decide whether engaging again actually serves the life you're building. From this position, choices feel cleaner. You no longer feel rushed to participate just because opportunity appears. You measure alignment instead of availability, and that patience isn't hesitation, it's confidence. You trust yourself to recognize what's right without forcing momentum. You begin to notice how often modern dating thrives on urgency. Messages that demand immediate response, emotions that escalate quickly, expectations that form before understanding exists. When you step outside that tempo, everything slows down, and in that slower pace, truth becomes easier to see. There's a sense of internal order that develops when you stop trying to keep things alive through effort alone. You're no longer responsible for carrying connection forward. You show up fully, but you allow reciprocity to determine depth. That balance removes strain from interaction. This approach also protects you from false optimism. You don't project futures onto people who haven't shown consistency. You don't attach potential to words that aren't backed by action. You stay grounded in what's happening now, not what could happen later. As a result, disappointment loses its sting. When something fades, it feels informative rather than personal. You understand that misalignment isn't rejection, it's direction. That clarity keeps your emotional state steady and prevents you from spiraling into self-doubt. You become more present in conversations because you're not strategizing. You listen without calculating your next move. You speak without editing yourself for approval. That authenticity shifts the atmosphere. It invites honesty rather than performance. There's also a deeper respect you develop for your own time. You don't overextend your availability. You don't linger in dynamics that stall. You recognize that attention is a finite resource, and where you place it shapes your life more than intention ever could. People who are aligned respond well to this energy. They don't feel pressured or evaluated, or they feel met. Those who rely on emotional volatility or constant reassurance gradually fall away. The sorting happens naturally, without confrontation. What replaces the old frustration is calm confidence, not because everything works out, but because you know you'll be fine either way. You trust your judgment, you trust your direction, and that trust stabilizes everything else. At this point, dating no longer defines your sense of progress. It becomes one aspect of life, not the center of it, and when connection eventually enters from that place, it does so on solid ground, without urgency, without confusion, and without costing you yourself. You also begin to notice how much emotional noise you've escaped, simply by not forcing participation. There's less internal dialogue, fewer imagined scenarios, fewer conversations replaying in your head. That mental quiet isn't emptiness, it's clarity. It gives you space to think long-term again, to plan, to build, without constant emotional interruption. This clarity sharpens your instincts. You start picking up on subtle cues you once ignored. Hesitation, inconsistency, avoidance wrapped in charm. Instead of rationalizing these signs, you acknowledge them calmly. You don't react, but you don't dismiss them either. That awareness keeps you from investing where momentum exists, but substance doesn't. Your emotional energy becomes more conserved. You don't spill it into every interaction, hoping something sticks. You reserve it for situations that show promise through action, not words. This conservation isn't guardedness, it's discipline, and discipline always creates better outcomes than desperation ever could. You also realize how much attraction improves when there's no internal rush to define things. Labels stop feeling urgent. Timelines stop pressuring you. You allow connections to reveal their natural shape instead of forcing structure too early. That patience removes strain and allows authenticity to surface on both sides. What's surprising is how many people respond positively when you're no longer trying to be impressive. Without the subtle tension of proving yourself, interactions feel more human, less performative, more real, and real connection, when it appears, feels grounded rather than intoxicating. You begin measuring compatibility through behavior during ordinary moments, not emotional peaks. How someone handles silence, how they respond when things slow down, how they treat consistency. These details matter far more than chemistry ever will, and they're easier to observe when you're not emotionally overinvested. There's a sense of self-trust that grows with each decision not to chase. You see that walking away from misalignment doesn't collapse your world, it strengthens it. That realization removes fear from future choices. You stop second-guessing your boundaries because you've seen the peace they protect. Over time, this way of living reshapes your identity. You no longer see yourself as someone waiting to be chosen. You see yourself as someone choosing carefully. That subtle shift changes how you walk into every interaction, not seeking approval, but evaluating fit. You also stop internalizing outcomes. If something ends, you don't carry it as proof of inadequacy. You understand that not everything is meant to continue. Some encounters exist to reveal preferences, not permanence. That acceptance keeps you grounded and emotionally intact. By now, dating feels less like a test and more like an option. You engage when it aligns with your direction, and you step back when it doesn't, without drama, without regret. And that freedom, earned through clarity and self-respect, becomes one of the most stabilizing forces in your life. What becomes obvious over time is how much of modern dating relies on emotional momentum rather than genuine compatibility. When momentum fades, so does interest. But when you're no longer chasing that rush, you begin to see how fragile it really was. Real connection doesn't depend on constant stimulation. It survives quiet moments, routine days, and the absence of novelty. You also start recognizing how often confusion was mistaken for depth. Mixed signals felt mysterious. Emotional swings felt passionate. But once you step back, those patterns lose their appeal. You realize that stability isn't boring, it's rare. And rarity changes what you value. Your tolerance for emotional games drops naturally, not because you're rigid, but because you've tasted what life feels like without constant tension. You no longer feel the need to decode behavior or chase explanations. If something feels unclear, you let it be. Clarity always reveals itself with time. There's a quiet confidence that comes from knowing you can walk away from something that doesn't align without needing to justify it. You don't owe everyone access to your time or emotional energy. That awareness protects your peace and sharpens your standards. You also become more aware of how attraction behaves differently when pressure is removed. Interactions feel lighter, people are more themselves, there's less pretense, and when interest is real, it expresses itself without being pulled or provoked. This mindset changes how you respond to attention. You don't rush to secure it. You don't fear losing it. You allow it to come and go without attaching your sense of worth to it. That emotional independence keeps you steady regardless of outcomes. You begin valuing your routine, your goals, and your inner rhythm more than unpredictable connection. That doesn't close you off, it grounds you. It ensures that anything entering your life adds structure rather than disruption. There's also a sense of relief in no longer needing dating to validate progress. Your growth is visible in discipline, focus, and self-respect, not in how often you're chosen. That shift redefines success on your own terms. Over time, you notice that the right interactions feel effortless, not because they lack depth, but because they don't require constant adjustment. Both people show up with clarity, both respect pace, and neither feels the need to perform. By this point, you understand why stepping back made sense, not as an escape, but as a reset. You didn't abandon connection, you rebuilt the foundation that makes real connection possible. And from that foundation, anything that grows will be solid, not fragile. You start to notice how your emotional reactions have softened, not because you care less, but because you understand more. You no longer take inconsistency personally. You no longer internalize someone else's uncertainty as a reflection of your value. That emotional maturity creates distance between stimulus and response, and in that distance, freedom grows. There's a sense of relief in no longer needing to interpret every interaction as meaningful. Some moments are just moments, some connections are brief by design, and accepting that truth prevents disappointment from taking root. You stop expecting permanence where none was promised. You also become more aware of how attraction behaves when it's healthy. It doesn't demand urgency. It doesn't create anxiety. It doesn't feel like something that could disappear if you say the wrong thing. It unfolds calmly, with mutual curiosity and respect, and once you experience that, anything else feels unnecessarily complicated. You find yourself less interested in convincing anyone of your intentions. You don't need to explain your pace or justify your boundaries. The right people understand without persuasion. The rest were never meant to stay long enough to matter. This clarity reshapes your confidence. It's no longer tied to outcomes or approval. It's rooted in alignment. You know who you are, what you value, and where you're going. And that certainty steadies you in ways attention never could. You also become less reactive to cultural pressure. The idea that you must be constantly dating, constantly pursuing, constantly proving yourself loses its grip. You realize there's no timeline you're falling behind on. There's only the path you're choosing to walk deliberately. There's strength in allowing others to reveal themselves fully without interference. You don't rush them, you don't test them, you observe. And observation, done patiently, offers clarity without conflict. You begin trusting your ability to walk away from misalignment without bitterness. You don't carry resentment forward, you carry understanding. That understanding keeps you open without being naive. At this point, peace feels earned, not because life is perfect, but because you're no longer at war with your own instincts. You listen to them, you respect them, and they guide you reliably. What remains is a sense of quiet confidence. You're no longer chasing connection to fill a gap. You're building a life that connection must align with, and that shift from seeking to choosing changes everything. You eventually realize that nothing meaningful was lost when you step back. What disappeared was noise, distraction, emotional turbulence that never translated into growth. And once that clears, it becomes obvious how much mental space had been occupied by situations that were never going anywhere. There's a grounded acceptance that follows, not resignation, but understanding. Understanding that timing, maturity, and alignment matter more than attraction alone. Understanding that forcing connection in an unstable environment only delays clarity, and understanding that walking away can sometimes be the most honest response. You stop replaying conversations in your head, wondering what you could have said differently. You stop analyzing outcomes as personal verdicts. You see interactions for what they were, information, not judgment. That shift frees you from self-blame and keeps you rooted in reality. The emotional steadiness you gain begins influencing every area of your life. Decisions feel cleaner, boundaries feel natural. You're no longer pulled in multiple directions by uncertainty. Focus returns, and with it momentum. You're building again with intention. Connection, when it appears now, feels different. It doesn't hijack your priorities. It doesn't destabilize your rhythm. It fits into your life instead of demanding you reorganize everything around it. That compatibility matters more than chemistry ever did. You also recognize how much strength it takes to remain open without being desperate, to value connection without needing it, to care without clinging. That balance isn't taught, it's learned through experience, and once learned, it reshapes how you approach everything. There's no bitterness in this clarity, just discernment. You don't blame individuals for participating in a system that rewards confusion. You simply choose not to center your life around it anymore. That choice feels empowering, not isolating. You begin trusting that whatever is meant to meet you will do so without chaos or constant negotiation. It won't require you to abandon your instincts or lower your standards. It will feel stable, mutual, and grounded from the start. Until then, you continue building your work, your health, your purpose, your peace. Not as a distraction, but as a foundation. A life well built doesn't rush to fill space. It waits for alignment. And in the end, that's the quiet truth. When you stop forcing dating to work in a broken structure, you don't lose connection, you regain yourself. And from that place of self-respect and clarity, anything that enters your life does so by choice, not by need.